So you hear the term the cloud thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? To really get it, we need to take a little trip back in time. In this explainer, we're going to trace the path from the old school client-server model all the way up to the cloud services that basically run our world today. Let's jump in.
Seriously, it's one of those terms that's everywhere. And yeah, you've probably heard it's just someone else's computer. And, well, you're not wrong, but that's really only scratching the surface. To truly understand why it's such a big deal, we first need to look at the world it replaced.
Okay, so let's lay down the foundation. Before there was a cloud, there was one powerful model that pretty much powered the internet for decades, and that was the client-server architecture.
And here it is, the client-server model. Honestly, it's a super simple but really powerful idea. You've got a central server, think of it like a website's main computer, and then you have a bunch of clients, our laptops and phones, all asking it for stuff. The server's job is just to sit there, listen for requests, and send back answers.
Most of these systems were built in a pretty standard way, using this three-tier structure. First, you had the presentation layer. That's the part you actually see and click on. Then, behind the scenes, was the logic layer, where all the real thinking and processing happened. And finally, the data layer, which is just what it sounds like, where all the information was stored. It was organized, it made sense, and it was everywhere.
But, and this is a big but, this model had some major drawbacks. The client and server were really tightly connected, which made updates a real pain. Trying to handle more users, scaling up, was a huge, expensive nightmare. And maybe the worst part, a lot of that pricey server hardware would just sit there doing nothing most of the time. We're talking really low resource utilization. Something had to give.
And that change came in the form of a full-blown revolution. This was, without a doubt, the single biggest shift in computing that paved the way for the cloud as we know it today.
Just look at the difference here. It's night and day. Scalability goes from being a massive headache to, well, practically infinite. Flexibility goes through the roof. In resource utilization, we go from incredibly wasteful to super efficient. So what was the secret sauce? What made all of this possible? It's funny, all of these huge improvements, this massive leap forward, it all really comes down to one single game-changing idea. It is the absolute core concept that separates the old way from the new way.
And that idea is virtualization. This is it. This is the magic. It's the technology that allows one single physical machine to pretend it's many different separate machines. By doing that, you break that rigid link between the software and the hardware it runs on. And that unlocks all the power, all the flexibility, all the efficiency of the cloud. I mean, here's the bottom line. Without virtualization, there is no cloud. Period.
Okay, so now that we know the secret ingredient, virtualization, let's talk about what's on the menu. You've definitely heard these crazy acronyms, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. They sound complicated, but I promise we're about to make them super, super simple.
The best way to think about this is with a simple analogy. Let's talk about transportation. Think of infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, as the roads. The provider builds and maintains the roads for you. Platform as a service, or PaaS, is like the cars and trucks. It gives you the tools to build things and move them on those roads. And finally, software as a service, SaaS, is the whole point of the trip, the passengers and goods getting from A to B. You don't build the car or the road, you just use the service.
Okay, so let's translate that analogy into what it actually means. This table breaks it down perfectly. As you move from left to right, from IaaS to SaaS, the provider takes on more and more of the work. With IaaS, you're still managing the operating system and your applications. With PaaS, the provider handles the OS for you, so you just bring your app. And with SaaS, they do everything. You just show up, log in, and start using it.
All right, so we've got the models down. IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. The million-dollar question now is, which one should you actually use? And the answer, of course, is it totally depends on what you're trying to do.
Let's start with SaaS. This is the one you probably use every single day without even thinking about it. It's perfect for things you just want to work. Think about your email or a CRM like Salesforce. It's also fantastic for short-term projects or for apps that get slammed with traffic at certain times, like a tax website in April. You don't want to own all that hardware just for a few weeks a year.
But of course, SaaS isn't the answer for everything. It's definitely not a silver bullet. You would never use it for a system that needs lightning-fast, real-time responses.
And it's an absolute non-starter if you're dealing with laws or regulations that say your data cannot, under any circumstances, leave your own building.
Okay, next up, PaaS, or Platform as a Service. Now this is where you shift from being a user to being a builder. PaaS is a dream come true for development teams. It gives them a complete environment to write code, test it, and launch it, all without ever having to think about the servers underneath. It's built for speed, automation, and collaboration.
So what's the catch? Well, the big trade-off with PaaS is control. Because the provider is managing the whole platform, it can get really tricky to pack up your app and move it somewhere else later. That's what people call vendor lock-in. And if you need a really specific customized setup, PaaS probably isn't going to give you that fine-grained control.
And that brings us to IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service. If PaaS is for builders, IaaS is for architects. This is all about maximum flexibility. It's an absolute lifesaver for startups that don't have the cash to build their own data center. It's also perfect for testing out a new idea or for businesses whose needs change wildly from day to day, letting them scale up or down in minutes.
But even that raw power has its limits. That flexibility doesn't come for free. That virtualization layer that makes everything possible adds a tiny bit of performance overhead. So for the absolute most demanding, high-performance systems, it might not be the right fit. And just like with SaaS, if you're bound by really strict laws about where your data can live, IaaS can be a tough sell.
Okay, wow, that was a lot. So let's boil it all down. What are the big things you need to remember? Number 1, virtualization is the engine that makes the whole cloud go. 2, the biggest benefits are massive scalability and incredible efficiency. 3, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS are just a spectrum of trading control for convenience. And 4, the cloud isn't magic. It's not right for everything, and you always have to think about performance and legal rules.
So it's pretty clear the cloud gives us almost unbelievable power and flexibility. But that leaves us with one last really important question. When we decide to let someone else manage our hardware, our platforms, or even our software, what new responsibilities do we take on for keeping it all safe, secure, and compliant?